Hey, Chris, how's it going, man?
Good, Josh. How you doing today?
I'm doing good. Man, I'm so glad. I'm so grateful for you giving a little bit of your time to come hang out with me on here and to chat a little bit about, man, just recruiters, the recruiting industry. And I'm hoping to grab some key tips from you for people that are trying to land their first job in tech. But yeah, man, so tell us a little bit about yourself, like, where you come from, yeah, where you got started and all that. So, yeah.
Yeah. First of all, thanks for having me on the show, Josh. I've seen what you've done on YouTube and your followers and the community you're building and the presence that you have. And I think it takes a long time to build, but I see more awareness coming from your end. And so when you had the show on, I guess last week I saw a little bit of discussion on recruiters and salary surveys, and I want to go out there and invite myself more or less to say I'd be
Yeah.
happy to be a guest on your show and just talk a little bit more about the industry. Because I think sometimes there's some underlying pieces of recruiting that either we don't know about or
Totally.
we don't really sure how it works. And I just wanted to make sure we have an open table discussion. So if people have questions, and the kind of questions that you have can be addressed here. And then anyone can take this offline as well if they want to ask me on a personal note as well. I don't really have anything to hide as far as what we do from a recruiting standpoint, how we get paid, and all those good things. But a little bit about myself. Been in the recruiting space for about almost 5 years now, specifically in Salesforce. My background had been an Oracle Siebel implementation specialist for about
Okay.
15 years before that. And so I graduated 20 years ago and done the dot-com boom and started to have my career first starting in Siebel, which was the next best thing in CRM before Salesforce came in and super weighted out of the market share from Siebel
Right.
customers. And went to a boot camp right out of school, got hired by a company called Unisys. They put me in a boot camp and they started throwing me to the projects. And then it was sink or swim as far as how to get experience doing SQL implementations. And I was a developer and moved through the ranks and ended up being an architect and a technical PM. And then worked for Accenture for about 5 years and toured the world with them and worked in New York and San Francisco and London and India and all across the globe. And it was a great experience. And then 2008 left the day to day from a delivery standpoint in regards to corporate and went independent, started my own LLC, did that for a good 8 years. I was able to network some previous contacts that I had established relationships with for other projects, and they were able to bring me as an independent. Had a good run with that. And then in 2016, decided to take another pivot and a different career change and move out of day to day delivery. I felt like I had gained a lot of experience through either technical implementations or being a project manager. I was a career counselor at Accenture, so I was able to help groom some of the younger professionals that were coming into the IT industry. And I
Right.
just felt like it was ready for me to give back to the community, and Salesforce landed on my lap, so to speak. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do when it came to recruiting, but again, I networked with past people that I knew, and it was Accenture managers that needed some help finding Salesforce professionals. I knew it was a tough need to fill. There was a lot of demand for Salesforce professionals and not a whole lot of experienced, qualified people to find. And I just felt
Right.
like it was a good niche for me to get into. And then also the community that Salesforce has to offer between user groups and Dreamforce and folks like you putting together podcasts. And there's just a lot of community engagement around Salesforce that I felt like I could be a good contributor to. And just like to participate and have newcomers as well come in to ask questions to me and really be able to share knowledge and experience about what I've learned over the years to hopefully help people either kickstart their career or continue to climb the corporate ladder as well within the Salesforce ecosystem.
Yeah, you've done awesome, man. I really appreciate how you actually do give back to the community. You're giving tips all the time. You're asking in-depth questions that make me pause and thought about that in a different perspective. I think that's really cool to watch. And I love the community here too, like that we get to do that and people are really responsive. And I think Salesforce has done a really cool job with that.
Yeah,
Um,
and,
'Cause-
and a lot of times I don't have all the answers. And a lot of times what I do is think about something that's interesting me, and then I'll publish that and post that out there with the hopes that the community will engage. And really, it's not so much
right.
about what I put out there as much as it is about people coming in and sharing their opinion or thoughts. And then a lot of people just say, I want to follow this post to hear more about what other people are saying as well. So it's just an igniter, I think, of it as far as coming up with something that I'm not scared to say, and then have people
Mhm.
come back and engage in that conversation, and then having other people that want to see and hear what's happening just to get different perspectives on it.
Yeah. No, it's been really cool, man. I think like when I think about other technologies, like there's not like a Node.js community that like loves each other. Like where like Salesforce has created that and it's an interesting space. It's weird, like we actually are helping each other and we actually care about each other. So
Exactly,
it's
and
very
that's what
interesting.
speak to at user groups and at Dreamforce when I presented last year. One of my quotes was, "There's no other technology like Salesforce where it brings people together. It
Yeah.
helps newcomers coming in that need some assistance, some guidance, as well as established professionals just looking for additional ways to advance their career." I just think that overall there's that culture there, and now I don't want to use the culture term lightly, but it's something that's inherent to those in the space that want to be able to give back and help others. And again, it's not for everybody, and some people get turned off by this or the marketing spin that Salesforce puts on as well, which there's a lot of, which I understand. It's all
Yeah.
about finding your niche, your pocket, and something that you believe in, and being able to continue to build on top of that.
I'm with you, man. So I got a couple of, so that was a good introduction. Lets us know you're in the Salesforce space now. You're helping out. To any of the listeners, if you're looking for an amazing recruiter, obviously please reach out to Chris. He's got so I'm sure tons of awesome opportunities that he'd love to connect you in. I got some hot seat questions for you though. You ready to go for some of
Yeah.
these? So, all right, let's talk about this. So, what is one thing about you that would shock your grandparents if they ever found out?
That's a tough one. I think I come from an Italian background, and
Okay,
a lot of my family have large families. So my mom's
right,
side, the Italian side, is one of seven, and then all of her siblings had multiple kids, and I only have one son, and that's all that we're having. So I think if my grandparents were still around, they may question why I didn't spread the love and have more kids to continue the the Italian
right.
family tree. And so they had passed away before I started having kids, or before I got married. But I think that would probably be one thing that they would question if they were still here.
Nice, man. I got 6 kids, so I know the big family
So,
feel. I know how that.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
my
we,
grandparents would be giving you a thumbs up and giving me a thumbs down.
yeah, yeah. We got them all like every time it's like interview, I'm talking about podcasts or anything. We just like have to make sure, hey, everyone, can you keep it down a little bit
That's
because they
right.
usually run around pantless and just
That's
all around. They're
it.
just crazy. Yeah, that's how it goes. That's awesome. All right. So if money wasn't an option, like what's one thing that you would love to be paid with? Your paycheck, it's paycheck day. They're handing you something. You're going to be so psyched if it's what, but not money. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, it does. Cheetos, maybe. I love Cheetos. I know it's not quite as nice as having some greenbacks, but I think Cheetos might
Right.
be one. Even an
Just like
occasional
normal,
trip. Yeah, just normal Cheetos. I'm not a
cheesy.
spicy
Okay. All right.
guy.
Okay.
Just
Cool.
cheesy Cheetos. That would probably be and I've limited my amount of Cheetos intake as I've gotten older
That's
because it
good,
tends
man.
to
I was
add
worried
more
about you.
fat on my body. But yeah, I guess that would be the one thing that would help keep me satisfied.
Yeah, I think tacos for me could be it.
A
I'm
good
a
one.
taco man. Yeah,
Sure.
I eat an embarrassing amount of tacos when they're good. But I live in like Northern California, and yeah, at least where I live, there's no tacos here for me. So yeah, but other than a little bit about your background and some hot seat questions, I actually really want to talk to you about the kind of the recruitment industry. From I'm working with a lot of people, and there's some threads on like Reddit and things like that where the recruiting industry is not like people are afraid of it. They don't know what to do with
Yeah.
it. Are these recruiters, are they on my team? Are they for me? Should I trust them? Should I apply for myself? So I have just a couple questions around that I think that could help maybe clear some of that up that I want to chat with you about.
Sure.
So first one, could you just give us like a quick overview of like how does the industry work? Like why, yeah, just what does it look like?
Yeah. Recruiting, usually external recruiters only get pulled in typically with customers when they are struggling to find the ideal candidate themselves. So now
Mm-hmm.
there's job boards, there's LinkedIn, there's Dice, there's Indeed. And so there's a lot of ways for clients to be able to recruit talent in. And so when that tends to not give them the results they're looking for, they're spending too much time and energy trying to filter through resumes and just not finding the niche or the key skill set that they're looking for, then they get backed into a corner where they start to see their projects slip, or they're not advancing the technology space like they need to, or just things
Yeah.
are going south on them. And they're like, we need to start filling some of these seats. And we're not finding the type of people, either from a culture standpoint or from a skill set perspective or experience perspective. And so we need to turn to an external recruiter to help, who can help dedicate their time to help us find people. And so a lot of times that happens where they'll reach out to me, a client will, and say, Chris, we have a very niche skill set that we're looking for. We need something that has the unicorns, the needle in the haystack. We spent the last 3 months trying to do this ourselves, and we're just not getting anywhere.
Okay.
And so when that happens, I have a consultative discussion with them, hear a little more about what they've seen, what they haven't seen, understand the job description a little bit more, understand what this individual will be doing, kind of salary structure, the bonus structure, if there's one that's associated to it, and just get an understanding about what internally is happening in regards to this role. If they decide to move forward, then we put a simple one-page agreement in place. It just says that whoever we find, if you haven't talked to that individual beforehand, we have, quote unquote, rights to that individual, so we don't get backdoored. And
Yeah, yeah,
that's why
yeah.
we put this contract in place, because we spend a lot of time and energy interviewing people and finding the right fit, and we don't get paid until that individual was placed with an organization. And so we had to put a contract in place just to help keep things safe on our side, essentially, so that a customer doesn't decide to reach out to the candidate on their own after I presented a resume and a phone number. And that contract helps keep things binding for us. And I'm glad to say I've only had that happen one or two times where it got a little
Good, good.
dicey, and the company decided to try to recruit around my back after I presented somebody. And that's why I hate contracts. Believe me, I like to have relationships where the recruiter can be trusted and the company can be trusted. But that's just the one piece of paper that we have to put in place to say that they agreed to our fees, and we have a 90-day guarantee. So basically, if we find you, Josh, a new position, and you go through the interview process with the client and you get hired on, then we charge a percentage base of your salary that the client pays us, and it's guaranteed for 90 days. So if for some reason you get terminated or you decide to leave, then the client isn't held obligated to pay the full 20%. So it's a tiered process. So sometimes
Okay.
recruiters might say, if you stick around for 30 days, it's 10%. If you stick around for 60 days, it's 15%. If you stick around for 90 days, it's 20%, or it can be
I see.
all or nothing. So you have to fulfill your obligation of being employed there for 90 days before we as a recruiting agency get paid on that.
Okay.
And so it's all percentage based. Different recruiting companies have different percentages. Some are tiered. So like I say, if I'm looking for an admin or a dev, it could be one percentage of the base salary. If it's an architect, it could be a different percentage, but we keep it simple at my company, where it's just a flat fee, basically, in between 15 or
Okay.
20% of the individual's base salary, based on kind of size of the company. And if they're a Fortune 500 company, we're going to be more than 20% level. If it's going to be a small consulting company or a smaller shop, we'll be at the 15% level, because at the end of the day, my job is to form relationships with companies in order to be able to utilize my services for the long haul.
Okay. So there's this title recruiter like that floats around a lot, and so I know there's a difference between in-house recruiters and then there's third-party recruiters. And so which one are you? And can you tell me the differences between the two?
Sure. So in-house recruiting are usually W-2 employees of the organization. An organization might have a talent acquisition department, or it could just be their HR department that's also responsible for recruiting. And
Right.
so those individuals usually aren't specialists in a particular industry or specialists in a particular technology. And so they take a traditional approach where they're going to post a position on LinkedIn or post a position on Indeed, and then
Hmm.
they're responsible for filtering through the resumes, seeing what keywords are met, and then probably taking that list of resumes that they get back that feel like a good match, and pass them over to the hiring manager to determine which ones the hiring manager would like HR or talent acquisition or the internal recruiter to do the initial screening with. So that's all help. That whole process is in house, right?
Uh-huh.
Then where external recruiting comes into play is where that doesn't work out. So either a company doesn't have an internal recruiting department, or sometimes small companies, the VPs or CEOs of the company are the ones that are actually doing the recruiting as well. And
Right.
so in those circumstances, they're more focused on working on the business, or they don't have the time to spend screening a bunch of candidates. And so they're going to reach out to an external recruiting agency to be able to send over maybe one, two, most three resumes that they find they've already done the pre-screening process. They've already vetted the individual. They've already asked them technical questions and what if scenarios, and just to help streamline the process, where they're going to pass that resume directly to either CEO or VP level or IT director or talent acquisition of an internal organization in order to get to the next step. So it just,
Okay.
again, it basically streamlines the process when you're using an external agency, and really allows you to save a lot of time when it comes to using external parties because we're only going to send, the good recruiters should only be sending one or two top resumes based on the people that they've
Right.
screened and they found and they evaluated on the company's behalf.
Yeah, that's awesome. So one of the things that one of the distinctions I've learned was LinkedIn, I messages all the time, and it's if they're an internal recruiter, like just a practical thing that I've learned is third-party recruiters, you can that's a great time to share your salary requirements, like the things that you really care about. You can be really frank with them because
That's right.
for the most part, like they're going to be on your side. Like they want it because as far as I understand, and I think we'll talk about this, but and interrupt me at any point in time. As far as I understand, like an internal recruiter is like working on behalf of the company. They're serving the company and they're trying to find you on behalf of the company. A third
That's
party
right.
recruiter is helping the candidate and the company and wants to make sure they get the perfect fit. Um,
That's right. That's right. And you're right. There should be a little bit more of an openness between the external recruiter and the candidate. And we only get paid when we place a particular individual. Now, we get sometimes back into a corner between the client and what they're willing to pay for a particular salary and what the candidate is
mhm,
looking for. And
right.
I try to vouch on the candidate side because, say, for example, Josh, I have a position here. It's paying 90 to 100K. Does that fit within your expectations of a salary? And you can say, Chris, no, I'm looking for 110K minimum for a base salary in order for me to make a move because you're happily employed where you are. And in order for you to
Right.
make a move, you got to make sure that your risk is mitigated as much as possible for jumping. And so
hmm
I'm not going to talk you down. Some recruiters may try to talk a candidate down, and I don't do that. What you
Right.
want is what you want. I'm telling you what the position is paying, but I'm not going to try to whittle you down to lower your expectations. And I will even submit you on your behalf and say, listen, Josh, it's only paying 100K for this position, but I think you have the qualifications, and we can see if the customer is going to be flexible enough to go up to the 110 mark, and we'll see what happens. And you want to have a recruiter that's going to be, has your back essentially, and being able to
Right.
fight for you, even from initial submission of the resume to also the negotiations. Right, that's what our role is, or it can be, as far as negotiating on your behalf. Sometimes candidates don't want a third party, an external recruiter, and I posted about this about 3 weeks ago or so about utilizing a third party recruiter to negotiate on your behalf. And it really depends on the relationship you may have formed with the company themselves. And you may feel like you have enough leverage based on those conversations to be able to negotiate yourself. Or sometimes candidates just don't, they have anxiety for negotiating salaries. And it's just easier for me to
Right.
say, Chris, here's what I'm looking for, work your magic and see what you can do for me. And that's where I come in and play and talk to the client and tell them a little more about why you deserve what you deserve and why you should be able to be offered that type of salary.
Yeah, I'm totally with you, man. I feel like with an internal recruiter, I feel like that's like the start of the interview, right? So that's where the salary game kind of is where you play that game where you're like, you don't want to go too high because then they're like, oh, this guy's out of our price range, but you don't want to go too low. And I'm talking about for people that are actually like desperately in need of a job or actively looking, I should say. That's a better way to put that. But yeah, and so that's when you have to play that game. I feel like with external recruiters, you don't have to play that game with them. You're not it doesn't if they don't have a job that fits your description that fits what you're looking for, they just okay, cool, like I'll keep you in mind for the next one with that in that salary range. Is that accurate?
Exactly. Yeah, I just had an interview today, and the candidate this morning was looking for 160 was what he was looking
Mm-hmm.
for, and this is high level architect. And I said the position's only paying up to 140. I said if we can get you base 140 plus a decent bonus on an annual bonus on top of that, would that be something you're worth considering? If not, then this might not be a good fit for you. Maybe you're
Right.
overexperienced for this role. He's like, I have some flexibility, Chris. I'm not currently working. I'm shooting for 160, but 160 can be a full package as far as base plus bonus, etc. And so he wanted me to go ahead and submit his resume on his behalf. So at the end of the day, it's the candidate's decision about how they want to move forward. I've laid out all the
Mm-hmm.
cards that I know about on the table and let them know, here's where it stands. And if you say, no, Chris, it's a waste of time for me to go down that low in salary, it's just not a good fit, then that's okay. I'm not trying
Yeah.
to squeeze a situation to make it work. This isn't because that never happens like it should.
Yeah, I think so. You don't submit resumes unless you have approval from the like. If I was applying to you and you said a job and I wasn't quite comfortable with it, you wouldn't submit my resume.
No, there's some trust there as far as
Right.
between in the recruiting industry. Now, sometimes you hear about recruiters that will take your resume and send it across the broad spectrum of companies that have
Yeah.
open positions on LinkedIn, and you don't even know what's going on with your resume. And so sometimes you may get a call from a company, a recruiter, and say, "Hey, we're calling you about XYZ company that you applied for." I don't know anything about that company. I didn't even apply for it. I'm not sure which position you're referring to. But no, if I'm going to submit somebody, I'm telling you that I'm going to go ahead and submit your resume. And when
Okay.
I hear more information from the internal operations of the organization, I'll reach back out to you and we can schedule a follow up interview or and see what's next.
Yeah, I've heard a little bit of horror stories too around being submitted to like companies that like not even qualified for. And this is what I've seen on like Reddit or in some of the different
Yeah.
communities. They're talking about as far as stay away from recruiters, and the reason is some recruiter put me in for this job that I wasn't even qualified for. It wasn't even the job description I was like the job title I was looking for, and in the middle of our interview, like I'm interviewing, I'm sitting down with the hiring manager, and he was like, he's talking about stuff that I've never studied, never didn't know anything about. And so yeah, so how common is that, and how do we look out for like good recruiters versus bad recruiters?
I don't really have the perfect answer for this situation. One thing that I would advise any recruiter that reaches out to you, look them up on LinkedIn, see what kind of either recommendations they have or what kind of digital footprint they have. Just get a better feel for maybe the company they work for. You want to do a little bit of research, and sometimes it could be too late because you had a phone call and you don't know anything about this person, and then you submit your resume and you don't know what's going to happen next. But maybe after you do that, you want to do a little bit of due diligence after the fact, or even before having the conversation. You're like, Chris, I don't know who you are. Can you talk to me a little bit more about who you are, what company you work for, maybe your LinkedIn profile, just so I can do a little bit more due diligence on my side to make sure, kind of thinking, to make sure there's some legitimacy behind the recruiter that you speak with and that
Right.
he's something that you can trust. It's something that I know a lot of times candidates are anxious and are in a rush to get a position and get an interview, and that's fine. But I think you take a step back and spend 5 or 10 minutes just talking to the individual, the recruiter, hearing a little bit more about them and what they're recruiting for, and dive into the position. If this position sounds fishy, if it doesn't like they're making it up off the cuff, like the conversation, then you have to start to feel a little hesitant about what are they really recruiting for? Is this a legit position? Are they just
Sure.
trying to get my resume to spam it across the network?
Okay. Yeah. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts on some of these like salary surveys. There's a bunch of companies. This audience is more of a general tech audience, but specifically in our space, in the Salesforce space, are these salary surveys, are they like trustworthy? Some of those salaries seem a little high to me. You probably see a lot more jobs than I do. So what are your thoughts on these kind of things?
I think in general, salary surveys tend to be inflated, and I think sometimes we ask why does it happen, and my thoughts are that occasionally agencies inflate them to say by 10, 15, 20% to hopefully get candidates to work for them and hopefully get
Mhm.
candidates to build a relationship with them and say if the industry's paying X and you're saying the industry is paying X plus Y, then maybe I want to work with you exclusively because you can give me X plus
Right.
Y. And that's a gut feel. I've never really heard that directly from an agency saying that's why they do it.
Sure.
It's just reading between the lines some. But I think the best way to understand salaries is just asking others, right? Especially with Salesforce, go to the community group, right? If you're going to Salesforce Saturday or you're going to your local community group or maybe post it on one of the community boards saying, hey, I'm 2 to 3 years experience. Here's a little more of my background. Here's the industries I've been working in. Here's the skills I've acquired. What would be a good, I'm currently, even if you want to say I'm currently at 75, would it be unrealistic to look for 90 and just see what kind
Yeah.
of the community says about that? I think the more information you can get will help guide you in the right direction. And unfortunately, salary surveys are just too broad. They don't really give enough details, and the details are really matter. And so, having conversations with individuals and diving into those details about your experience level and where you live and the industries you've worked in and the type of stuff that you've done will help formulate a better picture of what a true, I guess, realistic salary should be for you.
Yeah, yeah, that's good, man. I remember leaving coding boot camp being a little disappointed at my first salary, being
Yeah,
promised this this
That's
number
right.
that I'm like so psyched for. And my family, there's a bunch of us. So I was like so psyched. Oh, we're gonna make it. We're gonna have set aside some money. But like my first job, I was making 55 a year, which
Yeah,
is, it's just nice. But that's not what I
sure.
was promised.
That's right.
And that was that
Yeah.
was actually my first job in Salesforce too. So
And I think sometimes boot camps are the same way as the salary surveys. I say boot camps say there's a good chance of you making X when you finish the boot camp. And for me, I want to show me the candidates who have went through your boot camp and gotten a salary of X, right? And show me the ones that have
yeah.
gotten salaries of lower than X too, because you can't just go off of a blanket statement and say, and those that have made more than X, and then for the average, what's their background? Were they doing
Hmm.
something that was in a professional IT related? Maybe when they went from being a DBA or a network specialist or something else in IT over to Salesforce, so they had enough industry background to help them get a higher than average salary as well, which kind of
Right.
skews the statistics. So again, devil's in the details of these type of things, and have broad statements saying 1 year out of a 1 year admin making 80 to 95K. I just think there's not enough inputs into that statement to make it realistic enough.
Yeah, it's interesting. If you read the small print on some of the coding boot camps, it's oh yeah, you can make this, and we guarantee you'll make a salary at least this, but you have to move to San Francisco,
Oh
New
yeah,
York,
sure,
Chicago, LA. And you're like, I don't want to
yeah,
move
that's
to these
right.
cities. And maybe you do. Maybe then those boot camps are great for you, but yeah. So how does someone like best utilize a recruiter in their job search? So I'm getting ready to start my job search. Maybe in the Salesforce world, I have a certification or I just graduated coding boot camp. Like, how do I best utilize someone like you, Chris?
Yeah. So most of the time, recruiters, and this is my personal experience, I usually don't get pulled into direct placement services with those that have, let's say, less than 2 to 3 years experience. Because usually
Right.
companies are not willing to pay me a recruiting fee to find someone that they can essentially find for themselves using
That's true.
traditional
That's true.
job boards, things like that. But the things that you want to be able to leverage a recruiter for is, especially if they're specialists in a particular field that you're wanting to get more experience in, is just ask them for advice as far as resume reviews. If you take a look at my work to see if there's any feedback you can provide on my digital portfolio, what are you hearing about in the market? Just for recruiters, we do this day in and day out. So we're talking to
Right.
customers, we're talking to clients, we're on the phone most of the day or reading different articles about the industry. So I think if nothing else, just tapping into recruiters to find out what they know and how they can help you. Again, it's not going to be direct placement services because the chances of that happening are be small. And the one thing,
Hmm.
today I had someone ping me today. She's a relatively new admin. She said she's looking for her first position. And I said, I can't probably help you directly. I'll keep an ear out for you as far as noise on the street, as far as what's happening. And then
Yeah.
one thing I try to do is I like and share positions that come across my LinkedIn feed. And if you're following me, that may help bring up some additional opportunities for you.
Yeah.
And so it's just an indirect way of being able to leverage recruiters. Now, a lot of times not a lot of times, sometimes recruiters are busy and they don't get paid for really helping people without direct placement services. But I think every recruiter should spend a little bit of time every week helping those that are trying to kickstart their career, just looking for some guidance because there's a lot of
Yeah.
value that we can bring to that relationship forming process.
Yeah, that's really cool, man, that you do that and you have that feeling. And I just get the sense that it's not all about a paycheck for you, and that
That's
you
right.
actually enjoy helping people land cool jobs and helping companies too. But yeah, speaking of like resumes and things like that, I actually have a couple questions about landing a new gig, and maybe you can help some of my audience maybe land that first job or second job with some
Sure.
tips. So, what do you love to see on a resume? Like, what's caught your eye?
Yeah, so I like seeing specifics. If you're a generalist and have general buzzwords and keywords on your resume, that doesn't really show you being a differentiator. And so I'm always
Okay.
looking for things that will differentiate you from someone else. Like, how did you bring value to the project? Right? What did you do that went above and beyond the normal call of duty, so to speak? And then
Hmm.
one thing I love to see is a link to your digital portfolio, whether you've created
Right.
some YouTube videos, maybe you've built your own app, maybe you've done some white papers, whatever those things are that helps distinguish you and your capabilities, I look for. It's one thing that was posted, I think, over the last few days as far as what is most important to me. So I'm gonna go if I get a resume, I'll look at the resume, read it over, make sure that it's not just cookie cutter type of approach of a resume. I look
Right.
for specifics. I go to the LinkedIn profile, see what things match up on a LinkedIn profile, and see if there's been any recommendations or if they've been recommended for any skills or whatever on their LinkedIn profile. And then I'm hoping to be able to find a link or something to see either the GitHub repository or a YouTube channel or somehow digital artifacts that I can help dive into. Now, I guess I'm a little more of a thorough recruiter than others, but I like to try to get a full picture about what an individual has done outside of just a conversation or before the conversation is had, so I can at least educate myself about that individual. So when I do call them, we can have some good conversation back and forth as far as what they've done and looking at things and having intelligent questions to ask, and just helps build a better picture. Because at the end of the day, when I submit somebody, I need to have a good understanding and representation of that individual as well when I do that submission.
I'd love to hear some horror stories, man. What have you seen on a resume that you're like, no, oh, I can't believe they wrote that? Or do you have any of those?
I think it's grammatical errors, right? And just as far as Salesforce with 2 words, Visual Force with 2 words, you would see Salesforce with a capital S in one part of the resume and then lowercase s in another part of the resume. There's just attention to detail. I mean, your resume is about the best thing you have to represent you when you're first starting out. And if you have grammatical errors and just petty things in there that should be eliminated because you spent a good amount of time going through it with a fine-tooth comb, those are the things that just ends up just ticking me off. Because to me, if you're doing that on your resume, how are you going to represent yourself when you're developing in the Salesforce application, or you're working with customers, you're typing the email to customers and things like that. So your resume is the kind of representation of who you are and what you can bring to the table.
Yeah, that's good, man. Yeah, I think a lot of people see it that way. It's kind of, if you don't care enough to like really read through your stuff, how are you going to handle my customers like that I'm going to pay you to handle? Yeah, for sure. So what are some like ways people can succeed during a phone interview?
Sure, that's a good question. Don't talk too fast, right? Sometimes I know candidates have a lot of information they want to get out in one time. Mm-hmm. So they have a lot of wealth of knowledge and they just want to make sure they have the best, and nerves as well, and want to be able to get out as much information during a conversation as possible. And I've been through interviews myself, so it's not like I've always been a recruiter. Like I've had to fill I've had to go in and apply for positions and go through the interview process myself. So I know there's some nerves and anxiety and a little bit of stress. And I can tell you time and time again when my underarm deodorant wasn't working for me when I was going into an interview. And so I get it. I've been there and done that before. But one thing, just take a few deep breaths before the phone call. Make sure maybe you've done a little research as far as reading your resume over again. And then think about during the interview how to make sure it flows, right? And sometimes you need to take a step back and think about the conversation while it's happening in real time. And I know that's easier to say than to do. But at the end of the day, you want to make sure you're not leading the whole conversation. You want to make sure, and sometimes I have candidates that get disqualified because they talk too much. And that's something what the client says. Like, Josh won't work for us because they say it's communication skills, and I read between the lines and say they probably end up taking over it was a 20-minute interview. It took 40 minutes, and the client couldn't get one question in because this individual was rattling off everything under the sun, even around questions that he wasn't even asked about. So I think being conscious about the phone call, understand the questions that are being asked, allowing the interviewer to do some of the speaking. If you have a question, make sure they thoroughly answer it first for you before you interrupt them, things like that.
That's awesome. I was laughing and I was looking something up. I'm in the process of creating a course, How to Land Your First Job in Tech. And so I've been looking at a lot of like statistics and things like that. And it says, it was under millennials, there was just this statistic that made me laugh so hard. It said that how do people succeed in an in-person interview? It said body odor turns off 56% of recruiters. I'm like, put some deodorant on. Come on, man. Like, smell good. Like, at least be a good human. Other than just a good tech person, be a good human first, and then work on your tech skills. But,
right, and sometimes it's hard. Sometimes candidates are going, especially when it was in-person interviews. Now, not so much in-person interviews are happening. True. But if you're going from a position where you worked a full day and it's just say 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and you're going from that position where you've worked all day and you're going to an interview from there, you probably aren't smelling the best by that point. That's true. What you may want to do is ask for an early morning interview, or if it is a mid-afternoon or late afternoon interview, take the day off. And so just to help make sure you're in a good presence of mind, not just emotionally, but also physically and all that, so you can present yourself in the best light possible.
Yeah, that just made me laugh, man. I was like, I'm like, oh, I didn't know, like I should, but maybe I should cover this in the course, like hygiene before.
No,
I don't know, man.
believe it or no, you should. As I guess, as simplistic as that sounds, and human nature, you don't think you should have to mention that. There's some people that just don't know how to account for it. And then, like I said, I went in interviews and I showered beforehand and and then I just started sweating. I just have a sweat
Yeah,
condition that when I
yeah,
go
you're
into an
nervous.
interview,
Yeah,
exactly. And so sometimes that may bring out some additional odor that you weren't expecting.
I'm with you, man. It's funny because I help interview people now, right, for our
Right.
company, and I'm amazed at how casual people are on interviews as far as because we're not really doing a ton of phone screens. A lot of them are probably Zoom, especially in the tech world.
Right.
And so, man, I've had people like I'm laying down on the bed with them, on their laptop, like they have all this clothes and just stuff in their bed. And I'm just laying down. They're just laying down, talking to me, and I'm like, at least, like, or like, I don't know, I can't think of like all the crazy stuff but like I've just seen a couple people where I'm like, they didn't like do their hair, just kind of woke up and just threw on, and I'm like, and as much as that shouldn't like probably affect your interview, but like at the same time you're like if you get on a call with one of our customers and you don't think that like you laying on your bed like with clothes like bundled up in the corner like is a big deal, like that's scary.
It's like, where's the professionalism? And it's
Right.
funny. We had someone about 2 weeks ago decided to light up a cigarette during the interview. And I was like, oh, Lord. He didn't get a position. And just, I thought I've
Yeah,
heard it all. And that was by far
new
something
one.
that kind of, something that I've never heard of before. But yes, even with Zoom and getting a little bit more intimate or being a little bit more casual with the interview process, to me, the interview was one of the most formal pieces of the process that you can be. And I still think about wearing a suit and making sure you're dressed for success. And I'm an old school kind of guy. And so that's just kind of my way of being raised and the way that I've had success
Right.
in my career. And I think you can't, it's going
Yeah.
to do more good than bad, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to tell people like, hey, instead of asking like how little can I dress up and get away with it, ask like how fancy can I dress up
That's
and
right.
get away
That's
with
right.
it.
That's
I think
right.
that's it's way better to lean on that side than it is than the other side where you're like, oh, if they're gonna wear jeans and t-shirt, like that doesn't mean you should as the interviewer. You're trying to make a good impression.
That's right. You should be at least one step ahead above who's interviewing you. And a lot of times I
Right.
would go in and say, "Hey, Josh, I was planning to wear a suit today. But do you think that's appropriate?" And asking the
Hmm.
question, and they may say, "No, Chris, we're a little more casual here. A suit coat is fine. Don't worry about a tie or a three-piece suit or whatever the case may be." And
Right.
so I think it shows a little bit more due diligence on your side because you're asking the question and being upfront with them, and hopefully that doesn't turn them off as far as you asking that. And then if you don't feel comfortable asking, then again, just wear a suit and be done with it just to get the point
Just
across.
yeah, make it happen.
That's
Yeah,
right.
that's awesome, man. So, what are some pathways people can take to try and land a job, like maybe without experience? Because that's the most people that I'm dealing with. They're like, I've never worked a job, but I maybe in our world I have these certifications. Where do I go from here?
Yeah, a lot of times I tell folks that they have to produce something. And so you have to be able to be analytical and use your imagination and be creative and create your own applications and solve a challenge, right? Whether that's a personal challenge you have or somewhere where you used to work that they had a technical problem in the past, whatever the case may be, you got to showcase what you can do because an employer wants
Hmm.
to be able to see your capability. Just if you were hiring someone to do clean your house, for example, or do some yard work or build it. I had a new deck put in my yard a few years ago. And so I had people come by showing me what they can do. And the person that won the job to build the deck brought a portfolio of work that he's done in the past. And so it reduced the amount of hesitancy or reluctancy about hiring that individual because I already saw what they're capable of doing. I think the same mindset needs to be brought forth during an interview when you don't have experience. And when I first started in school or out of school, I didn't have any experience before landing my first job, and I brought some C+ programs that I did in school for project work and brought that in a 3-ring binder. It wasn't digital, it was just a 3-ring binder. This is in 99, 2000, and brought that to the
Hmm.
interview and went through it with the hiring manager as far as here's what the program was that I wrote. Here's what it was trying to do. Here's the value it created for the project and things like that. So it helps them feel
Yeah.
like if they make a decision to hire you, they know that you have the capabilities to do the job.
Yeah, I've been telling people I love your YouTube channel idea. People
Yeah,
that I'm like started working with, I'm hey, it's time for you to make a tutorial. Like, show us that what you can do,
that's right.
and put that on there. Yeah, I think that's an easy way. Or podcast, you could even something like this where you can people get to know you,
Exactly.
hear that you actually know what you're doing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and it
that's really
doesn't have to
cool.
be 100% correct. You may make some errors, you may
Yeah,
blunder along the way. That's not really the point of doing this. It's about you getting out of your comfort zone and being able to show them the things that you do know and being able to elaborate on those, and even having open up some dialogue and have some conversations. If you're able to show somebody something, that kind of opens up some conversations, asking questions, and then being able to get to know you a little bit better. Why did you do things a certain way? Things that's really what you want to have happen, so that the individual feels some trust and rapport is being built.
that's awesome, man. So talk about. I think you wrote about this the other day on LinkedIn, like being a specialist versus being a generalist. And do you say we should shoot for one? And why do you think that way?
Yeah, I've thought about this a lot, and my particular experience has been a specialist. And I want to say sometimes you can be a specialist in technology wise and say Service Cloud or Sales Cloud, or if you're working on MuleSoft or just straight Apex or LWC, whatever the case may be. But it's one thing to think about is maybe being an industry specialist, right? So knowing the ins and outs of a particular industry, right? And so the
I see.
technology, Salesforce may be around for a while, but if you become an industry specialist, I think you'll continue to be sought after because of what you know about how the industry works. And then having that additional Salesforce experience on top of the Salesforce, on top of the industry knowledge, will help make you a more sought after individual. And my example is I have worked a lot in the government space, right? So city and local government did a lot of CRM work. And what happened was I started to become kind of an industry expert in the nonprofit and the city CRM space. And it
Okay.
landed me from one position to the next position to the next position. And so my name started to get out there. And when they knew I was running off one project, hiring managers would come after me and say, "Hey, Chris, at this community, at this particular organization, told me to come off this project. We could use your help here." And they didn't, so the ramp up time for me wasn't so large because I already had the industry about how city governments function and how they use CRM for their sales and service.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great point, man. I never thought of it that way. Yeah, that's gold right there. Becoming an industry. And one of the things I tell people to land a job is you have competitive advantage, like because of your past experiences.
That's right.
So, like, for example, I came from ministry church world, right?
Right.
So one of my first times that I put in an application was for a Christian company, and I leaned heavily on that side of things because like I had a competitive advantage. I knew understood how the other end of it worked.
That's
And
exactly
so
right.
yeah. So
You
I
have
don't
so
know.
much
I think
already.
that's
Yeah, you have plenty of past experience to leverage to your advantage. And so if in the church ministry example, I'm not sure if they use any CRM, but if you were just starting out your career and you probably ran into some challenges working in that industry as far as how can we
yeah.
utilize a CRM process to either automate a process or to leverage accounts and contacts, opportunities, whatever the case may be. There's a lot of building a custom app for the ministry, for example. I mean, there's just so many different ideas you can take away from what you know that you've already done and apply those types of challenges into building a solution on the platform.
Yeah. No, I think that's great, man. Specializing in a field
Yeah.
is really rad. So what's one thing maybe out of the ordinary that you saw someone do that like actually landed them a job? Like maybe we have this sort of path that we're supposed to follow with putting in these applications and doing things. Have you seen anyone do anything like out of the ordinary that was like, wow, that's amazing then and that worked out? Or maybe a time it failed either.
I mean, there's a couple success stories that I know as far as people just getting out of their comfort zone. Like one individual here in Houston would show up at every Houston user group, was dev, admin, Salesforce Saturdays. It took him 9 months to land at his first position in Salesforce, but he was everywhere I was, he was there
Right.
essentially. And you can't just show up once and expect the world to open up to you and new positions to fall on your lap. It just doesn't work that way. But I'm pretty confident that if you're consistently showing up with the right attitude, shaking hands, getting to know people, someone's going to know someone else that has an open position that they can refer you into based on just you doing, just you be consecutively showing up and having the self confidence in yourself to be able to land your first position. So that seems to happen quite a bit in the industry. As far as things that don't work out for folks, just 2 weeks ago, I had scheduled an individual. He interviewed the hiring manager, and then they wanted to do two other interviews after that with other people. He told me he was available the next week, and I set the interviews. And then Monday, about an hour before the interview was scheduled to begin, he just emails me and said, "I'm out the rest of the week." No rationale, no explanation about why
Yeah.
he couldn't make the interviews, nothing. So I had to cancel the interviews. Client was a little upset. They're willing to give him one more chance because something came up. I just didn't know what it was, and he wasn't really open to tell me, which he doesn't have to. So the client said, "We'll give him one more shot." I rescheduled the interview. The client calls him twice to try to reach him. He was nowhere to be found, didn't call back. And then just at that point, the client threw their hands up and said, "Christian, we gave him one other shot. He can't be held accountable. Let's go ahead and cut him loose and find someone else," which was hard for me because it was hard for me to find this guy to begin with.
Yeah.
Because it was CPQ, it's CPQ developer. And CPQ is one of the hardest positions in my career to be able to find as far as being a USC or a green card holder in the US for a full-time
Right.
CPQ developer position. And I found one, and then this ended up happening to me, and it's unfortunate for everybody that's involved and ends up being a time waster for us.
Yeah. Hey, that's a good niche if you're listening and you're wondering, where do I need to go in? There's a need for CPQ developers. So
For sure.
start studying. Yeah, that's awesome. What do you think people can do to stand out, though, as a candidate? I'm in this process. I know that there's probably a couple people in this here with me. And how do I stand out from the crowd?
To me, it's being able to leverage your network and being able to do some research on LinkedIn for an open position. And don't just go with a spray and pray technique where you're sending your resume to 50 different positions in any given day. Look at the company that's hiring and who you may not know anybody that works there, but there's a good chance that you may know somebody that knows somebody that works there. And I'm a big fan of leveraging your network, and they say between 80 and 85% of your positions that you land are based on who. And so do a little bit of research, do maybe some back channeling to figure out who you might know that knows somebody, a second or third degree connection that can help get your name to the top of the resume pecking order, so to speak. Because if you just go in there, blindly applying for a position, I think you're just going to fall into the stack of resumes that they've already seen. But if somehow you can figure out how to either directly connect to the hiring manager or have someone, and your preferred method is having someone refer you in because they know somebody that is in the inside, I think that would give you a leg up against the competitors.
That's a great tip, man. I reached out to some people at Twitch. I tell the story all the time. I was psyched about they were looking for a Salesforce developer, and I reached out to them, and then he tagged all his teammates that were like on the same team as him, and I reached out to all of them, like just added them. Hey, my application's coming in. I'm really excited. I hope that what's it like to work there? And some of them connected with me, some of them didn't, and it didn't work out. I never got the job. But.
Exactly, but we took the right approach, right? I'm not saying that there's no 100% foolproof way of landing your first position, but you got to be a little bit uncomfortable and put yourself out there and show some excitement and show that you have some tenacity behind yourself, that you're really interested. Because I think eventually that's going to show up for you, and it's going to end up getting you a lot closer to landing your position versus just being haphazard about the application process.
I know we're coming up on about 53 minutes so far. I just got a couple other questions for you, man, and then we'll call it quits. But what has gotten people disqualified in the hiring process? I know we have not showing up for interviews when they're scheduled, not communicating, but is there anything else you can think of?
Not being prepared, and it's on you to be prepared, right? It's not on the company for them to be prepared. It's on you. And so why would you not spend a half an hour to an hour preparing for an interview and having good qualified questions to ask along the way? Everything is out, all information is out there for you to be able to find for yourself. And so research about the company, look at the annual report, talk to other individuals if you can before the interview, find out what it's like working there. There's just so much inner intelligence that you can gather before the interview that can definitely put you above and beyond. You want the hiring manager to say, wow, they've really done more than I expected them to coming into this interview.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if you can provide that wow factor, I think that definitely makes you stand out. Let's talk about like the things over and over again that disqualify candidates. Like maybe the top 3 mistakes. It can be on resumes or during interviews, or like this. You're like, if candidates would just do this one thing, whatever those things are.
I think on the resume it's having the resume specific to what you've done. And so saying that you heard about something or that you were part of something unfortunately doesn't show good credibility on your side. Right? The things on your resume should
Right.
be things that you actually have the hands-on experience. Because what the things that I'm going to drill into are those things that catch my eye. And so if you
Hmm.
say I was part of a team that did this, and we'll say, Josh, talk to me a little bit more about what your specific role was in that project, right? If you say I heard about it in the hallway while I was getting water during my lunch break,
Yeah.
and I wasn't really involved, then the credibility drops considerably when I hear that type of stuff. It's like, why did you bother putting that in your resume? Because I want to see the things that you specifically have done for an organization or work with a team, but you had a direct result in the end, a direct impact on the end result.
Totally agree with you. Yeah. Is there anything else like in any other interview processes? Preparation's key for sure. But
Yeah,
if we can
preparation
move
is
on.
key. I guess I guess you want to follow up at the end of the call. You say, ask them about what next steps are, and you can, if it can be in an email if you don't want to do it in the phone call. But I think follow up conversation afterwards, and you have to ask more than one time, right? They might forget about you because they had three other interviews right after yours, but you want to be
Sure.
top of mind. And so I'm always a big fan of continue to send follow ups until you get an answer one way or the other. Express your enthusiasm, express your interest, and maybe recap what you talked about, why you think you're a good fit. Here's what you heard. Here's the questions that you were able to answer, and things like that, just to show that you are willing to, spend that extra time and effort post interview to show the interest that you have in succeeding in this position, this interview process.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree with you, man. I think you've given us some amazing tips today, about the recruiting industry, about the interview process, how to land your first gig, how to think about your career. So this has been super valuable. I guess my last two questions were, first one would be like, is there anything you want to say about the recruiting industry or about the job search process that you want to get off your chest, you just want to let people know about, or clear anything up?
Again, I think turning to recruiters is a great avenue for people to leverage, right? But just again, do a little bit of due diligence about who you want to turn to, and you might get blown off by some of them, and that's just the nature of the industry, unfortunately. But
Right.
feel free to reach out to me. I try to schedule at least a half a dozen phone calls in any given week, resume reviews, things like that. I'm only one person, so my opinion may count just to help you a tad bit, but there's other people that are good recruiters in the industry that you can leverage out there to be able to help you succeed. But again, you have to have those phone calls. You got to reach out, right? And don't send a generic statement. Hey, Chris, I'm looking for a job. Can you help? That's a lazy way about doing it. I try to form relationships with people, understand what they're looking for, what their career aspirations are, and try to be a little bit more relationship forming in the process versus just trying to be transactional in the process. I know at the end of the day, you want to be able to land a position. That's why you're reaching out to me, and I get that. But to me, it's a little bit more than just kind of fire and forget with recruiters. And just like any other industry, there's going to be good, there's going to be bad to it, but you have to put yourself out there to at least have this conversation and reach out to folks to be willing to ask for help. That's the biggest thing, is just asking for help. Chris, I'm struggling. I've had 3 interviews. They've all went south. I've only had one round for each of those. Talk to me about why that happened. And a lot of times I don't have all the answers, but I think a candidate
Sure.
sometimes feels better about just vetting their frustrations and me may asking some targeted questions about, well, what did you think about this, or did you think about that, or whatever the case may be. And that may help them figure out a strategy to take into place to be able to do better on the next interview.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I'm with you, man. And I would say for devs, like, stop being jerks to recruiters. There's this attitude that it's, you work for me, like that thing. I'm not sure if you ever come across that, but I would say it's, stop that, cut that crap out, man. Like
Well, usually,
they're just trying to help you too. So
and I usually come into the conversation with a little bit of humility on my side. Hey, Josh, I'm not sure this is a good fit for you. I saw this position. It looks like it might be a good fit. What do you think? And so I think humility needs to be on both sides. And if I'm reaching out first, I want to be able to be warm in that intro and come in
right,
with saying, I'm not sure if this is a best fit for you, but you tell me. If it is,
yeah,
let's move forward. If it's not, tell me what a good opportunity will look like for you so I'll know about it for the future. Right. And that's the way
totally,
that I go about having the conversations versus saying, hey, Josh, here's a position. I know you're a great fit. Give me your resume. I'll get you submitted. You'll interview tomorrow. It's going to pay top notch salary wise. It's like, the used car salesman approach.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm with you. Yeah, I gotten some interesting job offers. I got one was for 190, and I only had, and that was what they were advertising, and I'm like, 190, but I only had 2 years of experience at the time. So I'm like, 190 for 2 years of it. That's wild, man. Like, get out of here with your shenanigans. But
Right.
hey, man, like I said, this has been awesome. We just hit the 1 hour mark. I just want to, I want to rep you, man. How, so people are listening to this, they're like, finally, a recruiter that doesn't just care about a paycheck, but like actually cares about me as a candidate too. Like, how do people connect with you? What's the best way to get in contact with you? Give us some of your, promote yourself for a little
Sure.
bit.
Sure. Again, I'm there usually every day, writing a post, writing a blog, doing things there. So you can find me at the CRM Recruiter on LinkedIn. And then I also take all the blogs that I posted on LinkedIn and move them to an archive called the crmrecruiter.com. And so that gives you the ability to search on past blogs that I've done, whether it's interviewing or resume tips or networking. Probably have, I don't know, 400 or so blogs out there now. And so if you want to be able
Crazy.
to search on a particular topic, you should be able to see some insights that I've had in the past. But LinkedIn is the best place to find me. And if I can help you in any way, whether that's interview prep, review a resume, talk to you about the industry, talk to you about salary expectations, however way that you can think you can leverage me, I'll be happy to be able to help.
Great. All right, man. We appreciate your time. You've dropped some amazing gems. I think that are gonna it's gonna really help some people. So I'm hoping we see a lot of people reach out to you, and a lot of people land their first or next job in tech. So thanks for your time.
Awesome, Josh. Thanks a lot for having me.